New York. Not the first place you would expect to see a runestone, yet here in Bay Ridge, there's a park named after the Viking explorer Leif Erikson, who discovered America, and there's a runestone erected in his honor. There's even a local pub called the Leif. And inside there are Americans who are celebrating their Norwegian heritage.
Why, I'm in New York City. Why are there Viking boats coming around? Well, here's the person to talk to, Old Norse philologist, Eirik Sturesund. Can you help us understand what on earth is happening with all these Norwegian flags and Viking boats and such?
Well, so this is the Norway Day Parade, which is an annual event commemorating the Norwegian national holiday of syttende.
Hurrah for syttende!
17th of May. Not actually on the 17th of May, but in the weekend that follows after it. And we are here in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, formerly the hub of the Norwegian diaspora in America, in what used to be essentially a Norwegian ghetto.
It used to be a Norwegian ghetto, but it's not anymore.
No. Well, the Norwegian diaspora has been dispersed across America. Many people live in Staten Island or the other boroughs. But there used to be 85,000 Norwegians living in Brooklyn, I believe, in the past.
And you yourself are kind of a Norwegian-American now, but you're not like these older communities. What's the difference between a Norwegian immigrant like yourself and these older communities of Norwegian-Americans, hyphenated identity Americans?
Yeah, I'll say that the Norwegian-Americans currently are a bit of a time capsule. Many of them have, of course, or they have all culturally assimilated into American culture, but they still retain some of the elements of kind of old-timey Norwegian spirituality, aesthetics, modes of thought, perhaps. But yeah, it's a very interesting hodgepodge of different cultures here.
So, Irma, I really love this Norwegian costume. Did you buy this in Norway, or did you
My mother bought the pieces, and she brought it over here to put it together and embroidered it. My mother did.
And was your mother a first-generation immigrant?
No, yes, she was from Stavanger.
Where, sorry?
From Stavanger.
Ah.
And my father also from Kristiansand. They came in 1923 and 28.
This is a wonderful folk costume from Norway. Can you tell me how you got hold of this and why you're wearing it?
When I was a young man and used to go to a lot of weddings, I realized I didn't know how to dance. Mm-hmm. So there was an advertisement up in the Euro Club, and it said Norwegian folk dancing. I was 21 years old. I said, you know what, I'm going to go to that. So I went to Norwegian folk dances, and they taught me how to dance. And while I was there, not only did I meet many people that knew my parents, but I became involved with Norwegian folk dancing for 4 or 5 years. When I went to Norway in that period, my grandmother took me to someone that was a retired woman that actually made these costumes. So she drove up the mountainside, and she measured me for the costume. And she sent me the costume, and that's how I have it.
Why was it important for you, as an American, to remember your Norwegian roots?
Well, it was always at home. I learned the language early, and our area was very inundated with Scandinavia. This whole area was all Norwegians.
And you used to live there?
I used to live on 51st Street. Yes, I grew up here in Brooklyn.
Right.
Went to school, and most of the children I went to school with was Scandinavian heritage. First-generation Americans. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of them.
When did that start to decline, do you think?
Well, you know, in the I guess in the 60s, people started moving out of the city into the suburbs. Mm-hmm. The influx, I think, were Puerto Ricans coming in, and I think everybody got a little scared. I don't know why. It was kind of foolish. And they all left, all the Swedes, Norwegians, German, Irish. The only ones that stayed were the Italians and the Jews, and they are still here.
All right.
They can't be moved.
What was it like when you were young, like growing up in a Norwegian community in Brooklyn? Was there a lot of like ethnic solidarity among like the Norwegian people of Norwegian descent around here?
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, but we moved to Staten Island when I was 2 years old. But I remember a lot about my youth. And right, back in those days, there was all kinds of Norwegian commercial stores, whether it's, we had the usual, we had a bakery, we had a grocery store, we had a convenience store. So as children, when my father would play soccer on Sundays, we were here every Sunday, and we mixed with the other children of the soccer players, and we were all over the neighborhood having fun. But it was mostly all Norwegian at that time. The 8th Avenue that we're close to right here was called Lapskaus Boulevard,
Right.
and that's it's still referred to that among the older people that lived it, and just as much as just as strong a hold as the Chinese have on it today. That's how the Norwegians were back in those days. Very strong. Everybody knows about it in the Norwegian Bay here in those days.
In the suburbs, have the Norwegians and the other Scandinavians retained the sense of identity?
Yes, we have in Rockaway Township in Lake Telemark, basically Norwegian. Yes, they came out there as summer homes. They bought these little cottages, and that's what my parents did too. They bought an acre of land up there for $250.
Wow.
And they built a little cottage there, and they had that there for many years. And then they put an addition on, and I still live there.
Does Staten Island have like a similar kind of Norwegian community in it now as the Chinese have here?
No, I would say most of all that has grown older and moved away. But when we did move from Brooklyn to Staten Island, we moved into a community called Annandale, which is mostly Norwegian and Swedish people.
Right.
And then there's another place in Jersey called Lake Telemark.
Yeah.
And a lot of Norwegians moved to Lake Telemark. So I guess you kind of try to culturally maybe stay connected in some way, make you feel more comfortable with the culture that you know and familiar with.
But do you reckon it's the case that these guys here have accentuated the importance of Vikings to Norwegian identity compared to Norwegians back in the motherland?
Well, they're certainly very hung up on Vikings, I suppose, because it provides a second layer to like a myth of origin to them. Not only are they Norwegian, but there's this pride that Leif Erikson came over from Scandinavia and discovered America, essentially. So they're very hung up on those kinds of symbols.
So Leif is a much more important symbol here than in Norway.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And that's why there's Leif Erikson Park around the corner, right?
Yeah. There's how do I even phrase this? I think that there's also an element in the Scandinavian-American diaspora that they cling to a lot of these national symbols, and in what I assume to be a search for a rootedness that American culture simply doesn't really provide. And so sometimes it comes across as a little bit campy and kitschy. You got a bit of this tourist shop Norwegian-ness here that I originally had a very ironic and distanced relationship to. But when I first came here last year, I realized that this is actually a very like real and profound expression to these people. That I came here kind of ironically at first, but at the end of the day, I thought it was very heartwarming in many regards.
Crazy Bob.
Yes, crazy's right.
Many probably feel and at least hope that the resurgence and interest in Norse culture works to their benefit, because I think that Scandinavian Americans have felt a little bit ignored, that their culture is seen as corny and out of fashion. So I noticed that they're definitely trying to hinge on to the different pop cultural stuff that is going on. You have Disney's Frozen. They're milking that for what they can.
Yeah, we just saw someone dressed as Elsa walking past.
And you got, of course, the TV series Viking. So it's all in a very exoteric stuff. And the diaspora is aging. I am afraid that I don't see a lot of people my age at these sorts of events, but there's certainly a lot of passion going on from their parents and grandparents' generation still around.
After the parade, everyone makes their way to 65th Street, where the Nordic sports bars are serving beer, hot dogs, and Lapskaus.
You think it's important as an American to remember your ties to the old country?
Well, for me, yes, because I was actually born in Brooklyn, but my mother says I was conceived on the boat on the way over.
Wow.
So it was a little rock and roll on the Atlantic Ocean at the time, and but
it's a long journey. You've got to pass the time.
Yeah, and there was no television maybe back in those days. I don't know, but the thing is, I have so many relatives in Norway, and it's been such a pleasure in my life to go back to Norway as often as I've been, which is almost 30 times, and my relatives and I have treated us so well over there, and I've developed friendships, and I have some friendships in Norway even closer than my relatives. So it's been nice to go over there to be able to speak the language, my brother and I, and to mix with the local, just the friends, just the neighbors, and we still have lifelong friendships going on to this day. So it is very important to me about my Norwegian heritage. I'm very very proud to be an American, but my Norwegian heritage is very important to me. It's been a very big influence in my life, and I'm very proud of both cultures. Very proud of both cultures.
I've been doing this since I was 11 years old. I was very fortunate to grow up in a Sons of Norway lodge here in America. I'm third generation Norwegian-American or American-Norwegian. American first, but I'm 1 part Vestland and 3 parts Sørland. And when I was 11, my parents put me in a Rosmaling class with my grandparents, and I enjoyed it. And then I didn't do anything else with it until I was about 15, when my father started making hope chest clocks and cornet cabinets and said, we're in business. I do commission work, I do all sorts of styles, I put stuff on the internet because I feel it's very important for people to have a connection with where they came from. We're very fortunate in the fact that we had that connection. In fact, the bunad that I'm wearing right now is a replica of my great-grandmother's bunad from Tysnes outside of Bergen. And my grandmother was the one who made it for me when I was in my early 20s. My children also wear bunads. But I think being American, it's sometimes strange to think people back in the old country will say, well, why do you still have this connection? Well, it's important for us to have that connection because we need to know where we came from in order to appreciate where we are here, but also appreciate where our grandparents or our great-grandparents came from and their heritage. It's part of what makes America wonderful is that you have this background that all kind of ties together. And there's so many similarities, it doesn't matter if you're Norwegian or if you're Chinese or if you're Muslim or wherever, we all have similar paths that brought us here. But what makes us so strong and what ties us is to know where we came from. So to have this background and to share it is very important to me. And because the only way art forms live is if you share it. So that's kind of what I do, and that's kind of my process right now is not only am I fortunate enough to do it as a partial living, but I am fortunate enough to share it with others.
The presence here of symbols of Celtic pride may seem incongruous, but this is due to the fact that the Nordic-Americans blended very heavily with the Brooklyn Irish.
And why do you think it is like the Italian-Americans and the Irish-Americans kind of, it seems that they're more prominent culturally in America than the Norwegians or Scandinavian Americans in general?
I think maybe they're just a little louder. I don't know.
In Irish populations, you have like the institution of the bar and things like that you can actually settle around. And in some areas, you even have like a very much a living folk music tradition. When Scandinavians moved to America, I think that they didn't really bring a lot of the folk music with them necessarily. So that does not really survive as an offshoot here. You have people who are interested in that sort of stuff and do folk dancing and that sort of thing, but you don't find the same sort of like worship of those elements of culture. Many of those people were kind of puritanical as well, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And they came at the peak of a religious revival in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
And do you think that in the future, Americans of Scandinavian descent will continue to celebrate their heritage?
I think so, yes. But of course, it's dying out because now the generations are moving into other ethnic groups. I see with my neighbors, one girl has moved into a Turkish family, another daughter has moved into a German family. So there it will gradually, dissipate, I think. It's going down, plus the old timers are dying off.
Hit subscribe right now if you want to see more. And don't forget to check out Eric's channel and podcast, Brute Norse, as well. If you want to see this channel live on and you want exclusive content, then become a patron right now. Thanks.